Something quiet just moved through Washington. And if you're collecting Social Security right now, you need to hear this before it gets buried in the headlines. A $1,200 relief proposal is back on the table, and this time, lawmakers are actually attaching names to it. We're talking about a targeted one-time payment being discussed specifically for low-income Social Security recipients. Those living on fixed incomes who've watched grocery bills, Medicare premiums, and utility costs quietly eat through their monthly checks for the past 2 years. Here's what the mainstream news isn't making clear. This isn't a random stimulus idea. It's being pushed alongside broader Social Security reform conversations happening right now in Congress, tied directly to COLA shortfalls that left millions of beneficiaries behind after inflation peaked. The people most likely to see this money first are SSI recipients, those receiving under $1,600 a month, and beneficiaries over 70. If that sounds like you or someone you love, the next few minutes could matter more than you think. So let me break this down for you in plain language. Because Washington loves to speak in circles, and most Americans, especially those depending on Social Security, deserve straight answers without the political noise wrapped around it. Let's start from the very beginning of where this $1,200 relief conversation is actually coming from, because it didn't just appear out of thin air. For the past several months, there has been a growing pressure inside Congress from both sides of the aisle. Yes, both Republicans and Democrats who are hearing from their constituents back home. Regular Americans, retired teachers, former factory workers, veterans, widows living alone, people who spent 40 years contributing to this country and are now watching their monthly Social Security check lose its real purchasing power month after month. The pressure has been building quietly, and now it's starting to boil over into actual legislative conversations. Now, here's something important you need to understand. The cost of living adjustment, what most people call COLA, was supposed to protect Social Security recipients from inflation. That was the whole idea when it was designed. Every year, the Social Security Administration looks at inflation data and adjusts benefits accordingly so that seniors and disabled Americans don't fall behind. That sounds great on paper. The problem is that the formula they use to calculate COLA does not actually reflect the real spending patterns of older Americans. It uses a general inflation index called the CPIW, which is based on what working-age urban consumers spend their money on. Think younger people buying new cars, going out to restaurants, spending on entertainment. That index does not accurately capture what a 72-year-old woman in Ohio or a 68-year-old man in Texas is actually spending money on every single month. What are seniors actually spending on? Healthcare, prescription medications, groceries, utility bills, housing costs. These categories have inflated at rates far higher than what the general CPIW was tracking, which means that even when Social Security recipients got a COLA increase, it wasn't keeping up with the actual cost of their real lives, and over time, that gap compounds. A little shortfall one year becomes a bigger shortfall the next year, and before long, people who were managing just fine are suddenly struggling to make ends meet. Not because they were irresponsible, not because they made bad choices, but because the system designed to protect them has a math problem built right into its foundation. This is exactly the environment in which the $1,200 relief proposal has resurfaced. Lawmakers know the COLA formula is flawed. There have been serious discussions about switching to a different index called the CPIE, which stands for Consumer Price Index for the elderly, and which actually does track the spending categories that seniors care about most. That reform has been discussed for years, but changing the COLA formula permanently is a massive legislative undertaking that takes time. So, in the meantime, some lawmakers are pushing for a more immediate solution. A one-time direct payment of $1,200 specifically targeted at Social Security recipients who have been most impacted by this purchasing power gap. And before anyone says this is just political talk that never goes anywhere, let me give you some context that makes this feel very different from past proposals. Right now in Washington, there is an active and intense debate happening around the future of Social Security as a whole. The Social Security Trust Fund projections have been a point of serious concern, with with estimates suggesting that without legislative action, the fund could face significant shortfalls within the next decade. That reality is forcing Congress to actually sit down and negotiate around Social Security in ways that they have avoided for years. Politicians on both sides understand that Social Security is the most important income source for a huge portion of the American population, and they know that inaction is no longer a safe political strategy. That urgency is creating a window, a real legislative window, where proposals like this $200 relief payment are getting serious traction they wouldn't have had even 2 or 3 years ago. Now let's talk about who would actually be first in line to receive this money, because that's what you really want to know, and I'm going to give it to you as directly as I possibly can based on everything that is being discussed. The proposal, as it is currently being shaped in these conversations, is targeting the most financially vulnerable Social Security recipients first. And there are a few categories of people who keep coming up again and again in these discussions. The first group is SSI recipients, people receiving supplemental security income. These are individuals whose Social Security benefits are at the lowest levels, often people who didn't have long work histories or who have significant disabilities. SSI recipients are living on some of the tightest budgets of anyone in the Social Security system, and they have been disproportionately crushed by inflation because they have almost no financial cushion to absorb rising costs. If this relief payment moves forward, SSI recipients are widely considered the most likely first recipients. The second group getting serious attention is Social Security recipients, whose total monthly benefit falls below a certain threshold, and the number being discussed most frequently in these proposals is around $1,600 per month. If you are bringing in less than $1,600 a month from Social Security, you fall into the category of people who are considered most at risk of genuine financial hardship. Many Americans don't realize just how many people are in this situation. The average Social Security retirement benefit right now sits around $1,900 per month, which sounds decent until you start pricing out rent or mortgage payments, food, medications, and utilities in 2025 America. But millions of people are receiving well below that average, and those are the people this relief is being designed to help first. The third group that comes up consistently in these discussions is beneficiaries who are 70 years old and older. The reason age 70 keeps getting mentioned is simple. The older you are, the longer you've been living on a fixed income, and the more cumulative damage the COLA shortfalls have done to your purchasing power over time. A person who retired at 62 and has been on Social Security for 8 or 9 years has experienced multiple years of insufficient COLA adjustments stacking on top of each other. Their real income has quietly eroded in ways that don't show up in headlines but absolutely show up in their bank accounts. Policymakers who are genuinely paying attention to this issue understand that the oldest recipients are often carrying the most financial damage, and they are prioritizing them accordingly. Now, I also want to address something that comes up every single time a proposal like this surfaces, because I know a lot of you have been burned by hope before. You've heard about payments coming, you've seen headlines that sounded promising, and then nothing happened. I understand that frustration completely, and I'm not here to give you false promises or hype something that doesn't deserve to be hyped. What I can tell you is that this current moment feels genuinely different from previous cycles, and I want to explain exactly why I believe that. The difference right now is that this proposal is not floating out there in isolation. It is connected to a much larger and more serious conversation about Social Security reform that Congress cannot afford to ignore anymore. When you have lawmakers from conservative states and progressive states both talking about the need to address Social Security sustainability, and when you have the trust fund timeline creating real urgency, proposals that provide immediate relief to beneficiaries become part of a broader negotiating package. They become bargaining chips that can help move larger legislation forward. That's how Washington actually works. The $200 relief payment isn't just about $200. It's about building political will and public support around a bigger Social Security modernization effort. And that actually gives it more staying power than a standalone proposal would have. there's also something else happening that is worth paying attention to, and that is the political reality heading into the next election cycle. Politicians are acutely aware of just how large and how engaged the senior voting population is in the United States. Seniors vote at higher rates than any other age group. They pay attention to policy in ways that younger voters sometimes don't, and they remember when their elected officials delivered for them and when they didn't. That political math is very real, and it is absolutely influencing how seriously lawmakers are taking this right now. Nobody in Congress wants to go back to their district and explain to retired constituents why they couldn't find a way to provide even modest relief during one of the most financially painful periods seniors have experienced in decades. Let me also talk for a moment about what $1,200 actually means in the context of real life, because sometimes when we talk about these numbers in political discussions, we lose sight of what they represent for actual human beings. For someone living on $1,400 a month in Social Security, $1,200 is nearly a full extra month of income. It's 3 months of medication copays, it's a utility bill and a grocery run, and maybe a small car repair that's been sitting on the back burner because there wasn't room in the budget for it. It's a visit to the dentist that got postponed. It's the kind of financial breathing room that changes the quality of someone's daily life in ways that people with higher incomes genuinely cannot imagine. We are not talking about luxury here. We are talking about basic dignity and basic security for people who earned their benefits through a lifetime of work and contribution. And while we're on the subject of what people earned, because this matters enormously, Social Security is not a handout. This is something I feel very strongly about and something that gets misrepresented constantly in political debates. Every single person receiving Social Security benefits paid into the system during their working years. Their employers matched those contributions. Social Security was a promise made to the American workforce. You contribute throughout your career, and when you retire or if you become disabled, the system supports you. That promise has not been fully kept in recent years as inflation has outpaced the adjustments that were supposed to protect beneficiaries. A relief payment isn't charity. It's closer to compensation for a system that has been under-delivering on its core commitment. Now I want to shift to something practical, because beyond knowing whether this payment might happen, you probably want to know what you should be doing right now. And the first thing I would tell anyone who is currently receiving Social Security benefits is to make sure your information with the Social Security Administration is completely up to date. This means your address, your direct deposit banking information, your contact details. When relief payments have been distributed in the past, and we've seen this play out multiple times now, the people who experience delays or who miss payments entirely are almost always people whose information in the system was outdated or incorrect. You don't want paperwork issues to be the reason you're waiting while your neighbor already has the money in their account. The second practical thing I would strongly encourage is to pay attention to official sources for updates on this. The Social Security Administration website, official congressional announcements, and credible news organizations covering federal policy are where you want to be getting your information. There is an enormous amount of misinformation that circulates every time Social Security payments are discussed, and some of it is genuinely harmful. Fake websites collecting personal information, social media posts with completely fabricated details, and rumors that spread through communities and cause real confusion. Always verify what you're hearing against official government sources before you make any decisions based on that information. The third thing, and this one is important, especially if you have family members who are also Social Security recipients, is to share accurate information with the people around you. A lot of seniors, particularly those who are less connected to digital news sources, are getting their information secondhand from family members or friends. If you understand what is actually happening with this proposal, you can help make sure the people you care about aren't being misled or left behind when it comes to understanding their own benefits. I also want to be honest with you about the timeline, because that's a fair question, and you deserve a real answer. Legislative processes in Washington rarely move as fast as people hope, even when there is genuine momentum behind a proposal. And there is genuine momentum behind this one. It takes time for bills to move through committees, get scheduled for votes, pass both chambers, and get signed into law. If this $1,200 relief proposal continues gaining traction at its current pace, the realistic window for something to actually be passed and implemented is being discussed in terms of months rather than years. But I won't pretend to give you an exact date, because that would be dishonest, and you deserve honesty far more than you deserve false certainty. What I can tell you with complete confidence is that this is not a story to ignore. The combination of COLA reform pressure, Social Security trust fund urgency, political motivation, and genuine financial hardship among millions of beneficiaries has created conditions where this kind of relief package has a real path forward. The people who stay informed, who keep their records current, and who understand their own eligibility are the ones who will be best positioned when something does move. You have earned every dollar of Social Security you receive. You have earned the right to accurate information about your benefits. And you have earned the right to have someone cut through the noise and tell you what is actually happening, without the spin, without the scare tactics, and without the empty promises. That's what this channel is here to do. Stay with us, because as this story develops, we are going to keep you updated every step of the way with the most current and accurate information available.